Have you ever wondered if your life has a higher purpose? A reason beyond what meets the eye? What if you were not just born into this world to survive, but to answer a deeper calling? The Bible speaks of many who were chosen, not because they were born to greatness, but because they endured trials that refined their hearts. In Matthew 22:14, Jesus tells us, "For many are called, but few are chosen." But what does it mean to be chosen? Is it a destiny, a mystical fate that singles us out from others? Or is it a transformation that comes through enduring the very challenges most of us avoid? Welcome to C.S. Lewis, 1950. Here, you will discover the path to a deeper and more meaningful relationship with God. This story is not for the faint of heart. It's not about a mystical journey, but a spiritual refining. It's about real-life struggles that shape us. Consider the lives of Moses, David, and Paul, each one chosen not because of who they were at the start, but because they were willing to endure hardship. They faced trials that tested their faith, perseverance, and resilience. Through these struggles, they were made ready to fulfill their divine purpose. The first test begins with a question: who am I, really? In today's world, we often define ourselves by what we do, who we know, or what we have. Many of us have built identities around our jobs, our social roles, or the things we possess. These labels feel safe. They give us something to hold on to. But when the world removes these things, whether by choice or circumstance, we are forced to confront something deeper: our true selves. Take Moses, for instance. Born into privilege in Egypt, he was raised in the royal household. He could have stayed in that comfort, clinging to the identity he had been given. But he chose to leave Egypt, to step into the wilderness and face the uncomfortable question of who he was when stripped of every external label. This test isn't an easy one. It challenges us to look beyond our titles, our accomplishments, and our possessions. It pushes us to question what remains when everything else is gone. Psalm 139:23-24 invites us into this kind of introspection. It says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." These words challenge us to invite God into the deepest parts of our hearts, to reveal the parts of ourselves we often hide. When we face this test, we are called to surrender the image we've crafted and allow God to define us. Many resist this process. The thought of facing ourselves without the comfort of labels is uncomfortable. But those who choose to face this question with open hearts emerge stronger, with clarity and purpose that can only come from God. When we answer this call, we allow God to refine us. He strips away our false identities and molds us into something new, something ready for a higher purpose. As we surrender the self-made image we've built, we find that we are more than what the world tells us we are. We are vessels of God's will, shaped not by human standards, but by His divine design. So, as we begin this journey together, I ask you to reflect on your own identity. Who are you, really? If you strip away your roles, your titles, your achievements, what remains? Do you trust that God sees something more in you than the world does? The journey of the chosen begins here, with a willingness to be shaped by God's hands. It is a path of transformation, not comfort. But it is through these trials that we begin to understand who we truly are. There are times in life when everything around us grows quiet, when the distractions of the world fade away, and we are left alone with our thoughts. For many, these moments of solitude are uncomfortable. They might seem like punishment, a time when our worries and doubts come to the surface. Yet in the life of the chosen, these moments of isolation are not something to fear, but something to embrace. Before Jesus began his public ministry, he spent 40 days in the wilderness, alone, fasting, and preparing for the mission ahead. This wasn't a punishment but a purposeful retreat, a time to reflect, recharge, and recalibrate his heart for the work that God had set before him. In a world where we are constantly surrounded by noise, whether it's the hum of our smartphones, the demands of work, or the relentless buzz of social media, taking time to be still can feel like a luxury. We run from silence, fearing that in it, we might have to face the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. But for those who are called, the test of isolation is a necessary trial. It strips away the distractions and forces us to confront the truth within us. It is in solitude that we can hear God's voice clearly. It is in the silence that we can discern the whispers of the Spirit, leading us in directions we might never have imagined before. In 1 Kings 19:12, we are told that Elijah encountered God not in the storm or the fire, but in a gentle whisper. God's presence is often most powerful when we step away from the noise and allow ourselves to listen. The chosen understand that moments of isolation are not for the weak-hearted. They are not moments of abandonment, but of preparation. Like Jesus in the wilderness or Elijah on the mountain, these periods of solitude are meant to prepare us for the challenges that lie ahead. They force us to reckon with our deepest fears and insecurities, the parts of ourselves we'd rather keep buried. But it is in these places that we truly discover who we are and who God is calling us to become. Many run from isolation. They fear the emptiness it brings. But the chosen learn to lean into it. They know that in the silence, they encounter God in ways they could never have experienced otherwise. It is in these quiet places that faith is forged and clarity emerges. Consider the story of John the Baptist. He spent years in the wilderness, isolated from the world. While others were busy with their lives, he was preparing, listening, and waiting. It was in that time of solitude that he became the forerunner of Christ, ready to fulfill his purpose when the time came. When you are in the wilderness, when everything around you seems to fade into the background, it may feel as if God is distant, but he is not. He is in the silence, guiding you, preparing you for what lies ahead. This is the test of isolation. It requires courage to face the quiet, to embrace the stillness, and to trust that God is working, even when you cannot see it. When the world calls you to keep moving, to stay busy, the chosen know the power of stepping back. They understand that isolation, while uncomfortable, is a necessary part of spiritual growth. It's in the quiet that God speaks the loudest. So as you reflect on this test, consider, when was the last time you truly embraced solitude? How often do you allow yourself the space to listen to God's voice? If you've been running from silence, perhaps now is the time to sit in it, to reflect, and to hear God's whisper calling you forward. In life, we all have things we hold on to. Dreams, relationships, possessions. These are the things we cherish and cling to, believing they are integral to our happiness and success. But the path of the chosen often leads us to the most difficult test of all, the test of letting go. There's a moment in every believer's life when God asks them to release something precious. It might be a dream we've held on to for years, a relationship we thought would last forever, or even our deepest desires and ambitions. But the test is not just about giving things up. It's about trusting that God's plan is better than our own. We see this test most clearly in the story of Abraham. When God asked him to sacrifice his beloved son, Isaac, Abraham was faced with a choice: to hold tightly to the promise he had received from God, or to surrender everything he held dear. Genesis 22 tells us that Abraham obeyed without hesitation, trusting that God knew what was best. This act of surrender was not one of cruelty, but of faith. It wasn't about abandoning the things Abraham loved. It was about releasing control and trusting that God's ways were higher than his own. When Abraham let go, God revealed his greater plan. He did not require the death of Isaac, but instead provided a ram as a substitute. In letting go, Abraham discovered a deeper level of trust in God's faithfulness. For the chosen, letting go is a continual process. Just when we think we've released one thing, another comes along that we must yield to God. It could be a career, a relationship, or even our own plans for the future. Life has a way of presenting us with new challenges that test our willingness to trust God with everything. This is where the chosen find their strength. Letting go is not a sign of weakness, but of surrender. It requires humility to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers and that God's purpose is greater than our own. Jesus himself taught this principle when he said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." Matthew 16:24. The cross symbolizes the ultimate act of surrender, laying down our will for God's. Many of us resist letting go. We cling to the things we think we need, believing that holding on to them will bring us peace. But in reality, it's only when we release our grip that we find the true peace that comes from trusting God. When we surrender our own plans, God can work in ways that we never imagined. The chosen learn that in each act of letting go, they make room for something better. God's plan for us is always greater than what we can envision for ourselves. Consider the rich young ruler in Mark 10:21-22. Jesus invited him to follow him, but the man was unwilling to let go of his wealth. He left in sorrow because he couldn't release what he valued most. This story serves as a powerful reminder that our attachments can keep us from stepping into the fullness of God's purpose for our lives. The test of letting go asks, are you willing to release everything for the sake of God's greater plan? The chosen know that letting go doesn't mean losing something forever. It means making room for what God wants to give us. It's a reminder that what we hold on to in this life can never compare to the eternal treasures God has in store for us. Each time we let go, we free ourselves from the burden of self-reliance and learn to trust God more fully. So, what is God calling you to release today? Is there something in your life that you've been holding on to too tightly? Something that's keeping you from moving forward in faith? The test of letting go may be one of the hardest trials you face, but it is also one of the most transformative. When you release your hold on the things of this world, you open your hands to receive the abundant life God has promised. There are seasons in life when everything seems to fall apart. The world that once felt stable becomes uncertain, and the ground beneath our feet begins to shift. Relationships fail, careers end, dreams seem shattered, and in these moments we find ourselves in what many call the dark night of the soul. It is a time when hope seems distant, and even the very essence of who we are feels tested. But for those who are chosen, this dark night is not the end. It is the beginning of something deeper. The dark night of the soul is a trial that often pushes even the most faithful believers to their breaking point. It is the season when everything we thought we knew is questioned, when we experience deep inner turmoil and a sense of abandonment. This trial is not one of punishment, but one of purification. In the midst of the darkness, God is at work, removing the layers of false comfort and superficial faith that we've clung to for so long. The story of Job is perhaps one of the most profound examples of this test. Job was a man who had everything: wealth, family, health, and yet in an instant it was all taken away. He faced unimaginable loss and suffering, and in his pain he wrestled with the questions we all ask during times of trial. Why is this happening? Where is God in my suffering? Has he abandoned me? In the depths of his despair, Job could not see the hand of God at work. His friends accused him of sin. His body was covered with painful sores, and his spirit was crushed. But in this dark season, God was refining him. Job's faith was being tested not by his circumstances, but by his ability to trust in God's goodness, even when everything seemed to say otherwise. Psalm 23:4 reminds us that even in the darkest valleys, God is with us. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. The dark night of the soul is not a place where God abandons us. It is a place where he draws near, working through our pain and stripping away everything that is not of him. For those who are chosen, the dark night becomes a defining moment in their spiritual journey. It is here that they come face to face with their deepest fears, insecurities, and doubts. But it is also here that they encounter God's faithfulness in ways they never could have imagined. Consider the story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Before his crucifixion, he prayed in agony, asking God if there was any other way. He faced the darkness of what was to come, knowing that his suffering would be great. Yet in that moment of deepest despair, he surrendered to God's will, saying, "Not my will, but yours be done." Luke 22:42. The chosen understand that the dark night of the soul is not about the absence of God, but about the purification of faith. It is a time when we are stripped of the illusions that have kept us from fully trusting God. Like gold refined in fire, our faith emerges stronger, purer, and more steadfast. This test isn't easy. It doesn't come with quick answers or immediate relief. It can feel like walking through a dense fog where the way forward is unclear. But the chosen know that even in the silence, God is working. Even when his presence feels distant, he is near, refining them for something greater. So, if you find yourself in the dark night of the soul, know this: you are not alone. God has not abandoned you. He is working in the shadows, preparing you for the next step in your journey. Trust that this darkness will not last forever. Like the dawn that follows the night, a new day of clarity, purpose, and peace is on the horizon. In the end, those who endure the dark night of the soul emerge with a deeper, more profound understanding of God's love. They are not broken by the darkness, they are refined by it. And when the light of God's presence shines once more, they will walk forward with a faith that cannot be shaken. In the midst of suffering, one of the greatest tests we face is the test of faith. When our circumstances appear to contradict everything we've been taught about God's goodness, it can feel impossible to trust. This is the season where the chosen are called to live, not by sight, but by faith. It is a time when belief is not grounded in what we can see or understand, but in the unwavering trust that God is at work, even when everything around us suggests otherwise. Hebrews 11:1 defines faith as the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. It is the assurance that God's promises are true, even when we cannot see how they will be fulfilled. Faith is the foundation on which we stand when the world seems to crumble beneath us. The test of faith often comes when we are asked to trust God in the unknown. Think of Peter, stepping out of the boat onto the stormy waters at the call of Jesus. In Matthew 14:29, Jesus tells Peter, "Come." And for a moment, Peter's faith was unwavering as he stepped onto the water, walking toward Jesus. But then the winds howled and the waves crashed around him. It was in that moment that his faith wavered. He began to sink. Peter's story is a powerful illustration of what happens when our faith is tested. The storm didn't stop. The waves didn't quiet. But what changed was Peter's focus. When his eyes were on Jesus, he walked on the water. But when he focused on the storm, he sank. Jesus immediately reached out to save him, saying, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Matthew 14:31. Oh, the chosen. This is the essence of the test of faith. It's not about having perfect faith. It's about where we place our focus. The chosen are called to keep their eyes on Jesus, even when the winds of doubt and fear are blowing strong. It's about trusting that He is greater than any storm we face. Faith in the midst of hardship is not about having all the answers or understanding why things happen. It's about knowing that God is faithful, even when we cannot see the full picture. It's about trusting in His goodness, even when life feels overwhelming. The chosen understand that faith is not an easy belief. It's a steady trust that doesn't waver with the circumstances. Consider the Apostle Paul. He endured countless trials, shipwrecks, imprisonments, and beatings, but he never lost his faith. In 2 Corinthians 4:8-9, Paul writes, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." Paul's faith was tested in ways most of us will never experience, yet he remained steadfast, trusting in God's purpose for his life. For the chosen, the test of faith isn't about having a faith that never wavers. It's about continuing to trust, even when we don't have all the answers. It's about believing that God is good, even when life feels hard. True faith is not just about believing in God when everything is easy. It's about trusting in His plan when everything seems uncertain. This test of faith is not for the faint of heart. It requires courage to hold on to what we know to be true, even when our feelings tell us otherwise. The chosen understand that faith is not a one-time decision, but a daily commitment to trust in God, no matter the circumstances. So, when your faith is tested, remember Peter. Remember Paul. Their faith was not perfect, but it was unwavering. And in the end, they were strengthened, not by their own efforts, but by God's faithfulness. Keep your eyes on Jesus and trust that He will guide you through the storms of life. The test of faith is not a sign of God's absence, but a confirmation of His presence. And it is through this test that the chosen become more like Christ. There comes a moment in every believer's life when the call to surrender becomes undeniable. It is a quiet whisper in the heart, a nudge from God, urging us to let go of our own desires, plans, and control. Surrender is not a sign of defeat. It is a powerful act of faith. For those who are chosen, this test is perhaps the most challenging, because it calls us to lay down our will and trust God completely with our lives. The test of surrender is about releasing our need for control. We live in a world where we are taught to take charge of our own destiny, to fight for what we want, and to make our own way. But the life of the chosen is different. It's a life of yieldedness, of allowing God to take the lead, and trusting that His plan is always greater than our own. We see the ultimate example of surrender in the life of Jesus. In the Garden of Gethsemane, on the eve of His crucifixion, Jesus faced the most difficult decision of His life. His human nature recoiled at the thought of suffering, and He prayed to God, "If you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." Luke 22:42. Jesus' surrender was not just about accepting His fate. It was about fully submitting His will to the Father's plan, even when that plan led to pain and death. For the chosen, surrender is not about giving up. It is about aligning our desires with God's. It is about recognizing that our plans, however good they may seem, are nothing compared to the divine purpose God has for us. Surrender means yielding to God's perfect timing, trusting that He knows what is best, even when we cannot see the way forward. Many of us struggle with surrender because it feels like a loss. We fear that by giving up control, we will lose everything we hold dear. But the truth is that surrender is not about loss, it is about gain. Jesus Himself promised that those who lose their lives for His sake will find them. In Matthew 16:25 He says, "For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it." Surrender leads to a life that is fuller, richer, and more aligned with God's will. Abraham's story provides another powerful example of surrender. When God asked him to sacrifice his son Isaac, Abraham did not hesitate. He trusted that God's plan was better than his own, even though it was beyond his understanding. His willingness to surrender his most precious possession, the Son of God's promise, revealed his unwavering faith. In the end, God provided a ram as a substitute, sparing Isaac and affirming that He always provides when we trust Him. The test of surrender is not a one-time event. It is a continual process. There will always be new areas of our lives that God calls us to surrender: our career, our relationships, our desires for comfort and security. Each time we release our hold on something, we make room for God to work in a deeper way. The chosen know that surrender is not a passive act. It requires strength, courage, and faith. It requires us to trust God when the future is uncertain, when His plans don't align with our own, and when the cost of obedience feels high. But those who surrender to God's will are transformed. They discover a deeper intimacy with Him, a greater sense of peace, and an unshakable trust in His faithfulness. Consider the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. Patnu, Onapadiadu, Wanabanas, Kidiadas. When the disciples brought the small amount of food to Jesus, 5 loaves and 2 fish, they were asked to surrender it into His hands. What seemed insignificant in their eyes became more than enough when placed in the hands of Jesus. When we surrender the small things in our lives to God, He can multiply them in ways we never imagined. So, what are you holding on to today? Is there something in your life that God is asking you to surrender? The test of surrender is not easy, but it is where true peace and freedom are found. When we let go of our need to control, we open ourselves up to God's greater plan. We discover that His way is always better, His timing always perfect, and His love always faithful. Surrender is not the end of our story. It is the beginning of something beautiful. When we let go of our own will, we make room for God's divine purpose to unfold in our lives. There comes a moment when everything shifts, when the fog clears, and the truth we have been seeking all along becomes undeniable. This is the moment of awakening. It is the culmination of every trial, every test, and every moment of surrender. For those who are chosen, this is the moment when they fully understand their purpose, their identity in Christ, and the divine mission God has been preparing them for. The test of awakening is not about gaining new knowledge or information. It's about seeing life with fresh eyes, understanding the depth of God's love, and recognizing that everything we have gone through has been part of His grand design. It is a moment of clarity when we realize that all the challenges, struggles, and hardships were not in vain. They were shaping us, refining us, and preparing us for something greater. In 2 Corinthians 4:16-18, Paul writes, "Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory, that far eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary." This passage speaks to the heart of the awakening process. It reminds us that the struggles we face are temporary, but the purpose God has for us is eternal. The chosen understand that awakening is not a single event. It is a continuous journey. As we grow in faith, we become more attuned to God's voice, more aware of His presence, and more certain of our calling. The more we surrender, the more we are able to see the truth about who we are in Christ and what He has called us to do. This awakening brings peace, clarity, and courage. Consider the moment when Saul, a man known for persecuting Christians, was struck blind on the road to Damascus. In that moment he encountered Jesus, and everything he thought he knew about the world was turned upside down. His eyes were opened to the truth of the gospel, and he became Paul, one of the greatest apostles of the early church. Saul's awakening was not just a spiritual revelation. It was a complete transformation of his life's purpose. This is the awakening that the chosen experience. It is a revelation of God's love, a realization of His grace, and a deep understanding that we are part of something much bigger than ourselves. When we are awakened to the truth of who we are in Christ, we are set free from the chains of doubt, fear, and insecurity. We are no longer held back by the limitations we once placed on ourselves, or by the expectations of others. Instead, we walk boldly into the future God has prepared for us. The chosen see the world through new eyes. They understand that their lives are not random occurrences, but part of God's divine plan. Every trial, every moment of struggle has been preparing them for this moment of awakening. They walk forward with renewed purpose, with a heart full of hope, and with a deep desire to fulfill the mission God has entrusted to them. But awakening also brings a responsibility. Once we understand the depth of God's love and the clarity of our purpose, we are called to live in alignment with that purpose. We are called to share the hope we have found, to serve others, and to be a light in the world. The test of awakening is not just about seeing the truth. It's about living it out, sharing it with others, and becoming the person God has created us to be. So, are you ready to awaken? Are you ready to see your life through God's eyes, to recognize the divine purpose He has placed within you, and to step into the mission He has called you to? The journey of the chosen is not easy, but it is a journey of transformation. It is a path that leads to awakening, to a deeper understanding of God, a clearer vision of our purpose, and a life that is fully surrendered to His will. As you walk this path, remember that every trial, every test, and every moment of surrender has been preparing you for this moment of awakening. Trust that God is with you, guiding you, and refining you for His greater purpose. And when the moment of awakening comes, you will see that the path you've walked was not in vain. It was all part of God's beautiful plan. As we reflect on the journey of the chosen, we are reminded of the lessons we can apply to our own lives. The tests of identity, isolation, letting go. The dark night of the soul, faith, surrender, and awakening shape us in ways we cannot always understand in the moment. Yet, each test brings us closer to a deeper relationship with God and a more fulfilling life. The path is not easy, but it is one of transformation. Through every challenge, God is refining us, preparing us for the greater purpose He has in store. So, as you walk this path, know that you are not alone. God is with you every step of the way, guiding you, shaping you, and calling you to a deeper, more meaningful relationship with Him. What test resonates with you the most? Which of these spiritual challenges have you faced in your own life, and how did they shape your journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the C.S. Lewis 1950 channel for more insights into living a life of purpose and faith.